I've been on a bit of a zombie game kick lately. Recently I started the Resident Evil franchise, and yes, I know those are not zombies, but you know what I'm trying to say. And currently I've just made it to Resident Evil 6. I've replayed Days Gone again on PC recently, which is still one of my favorite open world zombie games. You can check out this video for more of my thoughts on that, but to me, Dying Light just hits differently. I played Dying Light 1 twice now, once at launch and one recently. In fact, a few days ago, just to refresh my memory before Dying Light the Beast drops soon. So if you're watching this video before the Beast drops, then I 1000% recommend you to play or replay Dying Light 1 again. In my personal opinion, there aren't many open world zombie games that are considered to be amazing. There's of course the common ones such as Dead Island, Days Gone, State of Decay 2 and a few others, but there's one game from that open world zombie genre that stands out, and to me that's always been the very first Dying Light. The sequel is still great, but it doesn't quite reach the same level. The original Dying Light remains an ideal example of how to create an open world game that does a fantastic job capturing an apocalyptic atmosphere. Now, Dying Light as a game is not revolutionary. It's not a generation defining game. You know, it's not your Expedition 33s, your Red Deads, your Witchers and so on. It borrows a ton of familiar mechanics we've seen a lot. An open world, some zombies, great parkour, crafting of course, generic skill trees, all that stuff you've seen a million times. But what makes it stand out is how all of these ideas actually come together and complement each other well. What makes it even cooler is knowing this all comes from Techland, a relatively small studio compared to the big AAA studios. And yet Dying Light became this huge success that really put them on the map. Over the years, the franchise has sold over 30 million copies, with the original game being the standout seller. And while the sequel, Dying Light 2, sold 5 million copies in its first month and was one of the most wish-listed games on Steam in 2021, it's the first Dying Light that still feels like the crown jewel. It was a watershed moment for Techland, showing that they could take something as played out as zombies and make it feel fresh again. I will say though, when Dying Light launched, it landed in the mid-70s range on Metacritic, which yes, don't judge a game based on Metacritic, but that score baffled me. I can name a few worse games that a majority of people would agree with that have much higher scores than Dying Light on Metacritic. Now, the main reason for the 74 score was that the zombie game market was completely oversaturated at the time. So the critic reviews all parroted each other, saying that it's just another post-apocalyptic game. But forget that, this is my video and my journey with the brilliance that is Dying Light 1. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the story of Dying Light. I know this is a bit of a divisive topic. Some people will straight up tell you the story is ass, and I kind of get why. It's not groundbreaking, but it's still very enjoyable. You play as Carl Crane, an undercover agent for the GRE, sent into Harran to retrieve some sensitive files from a man named Rice. But almost as soon as you land, everything goes wrong. You get ambushed, bitten, and thrown straight into the shit show of a city that's already been overrun by the infection. At first, Carl Crane is just doing his job. He's following orders, but as he spends more time with the survivors in the tower, people like Jade, Brecken and Raheem, he starts to realize the GRE doesn't actually care about these people, and slowly Crane becomes invested in their survival, choosing to help them instead of completing his mission. I will say watching Crane change from I'm just here for a mission to I can't just abandon these people gives the story a nice human touch. Now I will also say there are a few cliche moments, and it definitely leaves a few dangling plot threads that don't really go anywhere. Like early on, the game really emphasizes how important antizin is. That's the key to survival, and the people are dying without it. Right at the start, you destroy a stockpile of it because you're ordered to by the GRE as part of their plan to force an interaction with Rice and potentially locate Kadir Suleiman. This moment sets the tone for just how important antizin is, with Brecken emphasizing that millions of people will die without it. And then later on, there's a moment in the story where the antizin stops being sent to Harran entirely, and it just shows you how important it is and the desperate nature of it. But then halfway in the story, that desperation for the antizin just goes. The game shifts its focus to stopping Rice, who is the main villain, and we never really see the fallout of those decisions. The desperation of antizin is shown later in the following DLC, and it's why we go to the countryside. I'll get into that later in the video. There are also moments where you're screaming at the screen. Why the hell did Carl Crane not just lie to the GRE instead of burning it? That's the kind of inconsistent writing this game would often have. But, and big but, but I still found it enjoyable. It's one of those stories that doesn't pretend to be anything more than it is. It's not trying to be some deep emotional character study. It's a story that does a fantastic job of having the gameplay play a massive part in the appeal. What really sells it for me are the characters. Jade I thought was a genuinely likable and strong character, and then we had to put her out of her misery. That moment was emotional because at that point, her brother and also Crane's new best friend Raheem had turned, so he also had to be put out of his misery too. And even Brecken as a character is quite interesting, despite him kind of disappearing entirely at one point. But he feels like a leader desperately holding everything together with what little he has. Even Rice, for all of his generic over-the-top villain energy, he reminded me of a Far Cry villain, like a mixture of Pagan, Min and Vas. Is that just me? Like for example, I hated him and wanted to kill him, but I also knew he'd be one of those villains that just escapes the palm of your hand at the very last second at every moment. Now I will say the performances helped a lot, especially Carl Crane. You see, I'm sure we all know that he's voiced by Roger Craig Smith, right? Who again I'm sure you all know is the voice actor for Ezio Auditore from Assassin's Creed. And if you know anything about my channel, I'm a die-hard Assassin's Creed fan. So hearing Ezio's voice come out of Carl Crane is such a weird feeling. It makes me strangely attached to the character, even though, let's be real, Crane himself isn't the deepest protagonist ever written. It's kind of funny, but throughout the game there are these really subtle little mentions that weirdly remind me of Ezio. Like at one point the game casually brings up Machiavelli out of all people.
And you know the old saying, it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both.
Machiavelli.
Correct. Smart fellow, that one.
And hearing Ezio's voice actor talk about Machiavelli just feels, I don't know, kind of surreal. Almost a little trippy if you're an Assassin's Creed fan like me. What I like most is that the story doesn't overcomplicate itself. It's straightforward. You're stuck in a quarantine city, you're infected, and you're trying to help the people around you while figuring out who you can really trust. It sets the stage for the real highlight of the game, which isn't even a character, but instead is Harran itself and the way you experience it. Despite being a zombie apocalypse and barely any survivors out there, Harran still feels alive. You see the desperation in the survivors, you see how people have adapted to living on rooftops, barricading themselves at a fishing port, or hiding in a random apartment. So yeah, is it a perfect story? No, not even close. It's a good story. A solid 7 out of 10. It's engaging enough to keep you moving forward. It has that unknown zombie movie vibe where you're not expecting it to blow your mind, but you're still invested in seeing how it all plays out. For me, it was enjoyable from start to finish because it never really overstays its welcome. It gives you just enough plot to justify all the rooftop parkour that you do to get from point A to point B. It justifies all the zombie smashing that you do, and it also justifies those terrifying nights shitting yourself against a volatile. And you know, that's all it needed to do. One of the things that makes Dying Light so memorable is its open world. That's the highlight of the game. Not the story, but the world itself. This is an open world that is unlike your generic open world games. It's not one of those open worlds that present you with big flat space. It's a vertical playground. The streets are a pure shit show. They're quite narrow and crawling with infected. You don't want to be down there unless you absolutely have to. In fact, most of my playtime is on the rooftops, and I'm sure that's the same for everyone else. Because the rooftops feel like your safe haven. They're your escape route. The entire city is designed around this contrast. The idea is danger down below, freedom and safety above. And the more you play, the more you realize how much the environment itself shapes the way you move. It's almost like Harran teaches you how to play because at first, admit it, you were hesitant. You'll probably be afraid to make a certain jump because you think you wouldn't make it. But after a while, you're literally chaining vaults, you're jumping across every platform like it's second nature. The same goes for heights too. I'm somebody that has vertigo, and when I jumped down a few times from a building to a soft landing below, my stomach got this weird twisted feeling, but gradually the more I jumped in the game, the vertigo just disappeared. But Harran itself is by no means a generic city, as I said earlier. It's full, and I mean full, of environmental storytelling. You'll make your way into an abandoned apartment and find a table still set for dinner, or maybe you'll find a barricaded room with blood-written walls, which you can put together are the remnants of people who tried and failed to survive. There are blocked off tunnels, you'll often see makeshift camps and a bunch of notes scattered around that hint at what life was like before the outbreak completely consumed the city. None of it is shoved in your face, but it's there, especially if you take the time to look, and it makes the world feel lived in. In terms of the content within the open world, there's of course the dynamic encounters. You might be running towards a main mission, only to hear screams nearby. A survivor's being attacked by zombies and you have a split-second choice. Do you stop and help them or keep moving? Now, I'm not gonna lie, I stopped and helped a lot at first, but it did get a bit repetitive, especially seeing as you get rewarded with like $100 or a terrible weapon modifier, which is nothing in this game. Sometimes you'll see a supply drop parachuting down and suddenly you'll find yourself racing against Rise's men to grab it before they do. There's of course the side quests too, which I'll get into later in more depth, because those are incredible. But apart from the stuff I mentioned, there's also the bounties, which are pretty much small challenges layered on top of your normal gameplay. Things like kill 50 infected with blunt weapons, headshot 10 virals in one night, that sort of stuff. Then there are the safe zones, which are your little pockets of security scattered around the map. Now at first, most are overrun with infected, so you have to clear them out and restore the power before they become usable. It's a simple 2-step process. Clear the area and turn on the lights. But it always feels rewarding because each zone becomes a checkpoint, a place to sleep through the night, restock and fast travel. Well, sort of. Sometimes I would let myself die just so I can respawn at a safe zone. A bit scummy, I know, but hey, it works. And of course we have to talk about the day-night cycle because it completely changes how you play the game. During the day, the city is very calm and definitely manageable. You can take your time with everything, doing what you want, and most of the infected are slow to the point where you can easily outmaneuver them. But when night falls, oh boy, the entire tone of the game just changes to a horror game. The volatiles come out, which are these terrifying, fast and almost unstoppable monsters that will hunt you relentlessly if they spot you. You literally go from being the predator to being the prey, and suddenly you'll find yourself not parkouring anymore or running as fast as you can, but instead you're being careful not to get into the vision cone of a volatile. It is fun though, and even rewarding because you're given double XP at nighttime, which makes the risk even more tempting. And that risk reward system is genius because it pushes you out of your comfort zone. The first time the game forces you to go out at night, it's terrifying, and I know everybody on their first playthrough was crouching and praying they don't see you. I also love how unique each part of Harran feels. The developers did a fantastic job with the city, and it's a shame I didn't really get the same feeling with Dying Light 2, as the design layout of that game felt very repetitive in its open world. In Dying Light 1, the game has unique environments all around. Of course, there are plenty of copy-pasted areas, but you have to remember that at this time, this was a pretty small studio developing the game. Then later in the story you get to Old Town, which is way different in everything. Unlike the slums where everything was definitely poorer, Old Town has a kind of European style architecture that you can quite evidently tell is a lot different to the slums. It was clearly once the wealthier part of the city, and you can still see the remnants of its old beauty despite the outbreak. It's a lot more vertical with way taller buildings and a lot more tighter spaces, which makes parkour even more fun. Although I will say the grapple hook in Old Town is a cheat code, and it is very fun to use. I don't know how many times it saved my ass from being chased by virals because they are fast as hell, maybe too fast, and that shift from Harran to Old Town keeps things fresh just when you're starting to feel like you've mastered the first area completely. And then there's the countryside in the following DLC, which completely changes the vibe again, but that's a whole other topic I'll get into later. At its core, Dying Light is a game about freedom and fear. The game constantly makes you decide, should you fight or should you run? That decision always feels meaningful, because your movement, your combat and survival are all closely tied together, shaping how you handle every situation. Let's start with the movement, because to be honest, it's the soul of the game. The parkour system was clearly inspired by Mirror's Edge, but it's more dynamic and more forgiving, just enough to make you feel like a true badass without turning it into an autopilot experience. As an Assassin's Creed fan who loves parkour, a first-person game like Dying Light is perfect for me, as it satisfies every need in my body. Harran is a vertical city, so rooftops are not really shortcuts. Every railing, every ledge and pole is climbable, and the game very quietly guides you to understand its flow. Early on you'll be a mess and you'll constantly miss jumps and panic when zombies corner you, but as you unlock more skills such as wall climbing, vaulting over zombies, reducing fall damage and stuff like that, you start chaining moves together smoothly. I think the game's natural movement system is the hidden MVP. It makes the world feel so logical. You know, if something looks like it should be climbable, it often is. Now I played on keyboard and mouse and the game's movement system allows you to bunny hop, which I love. The fact that you can move your character mid-air is amazing. Now yes, it's unrealistic as hell, but for a game like this where movement is paramount, it's such a great thing to be able to do. When you finally unlock the grappling hook, it's like Harran opens up even more, letting you swing around like an apocalyptic Spider-Man. It doesn't fully replace traditional parkour, there's a limited number of uses before it needs to recharge, but it's a game changer for traversal, especially in Old Town when you accidentally find yourself on the floor. Now combat on the other hand is the other half of survival. In the beginning it's kind of a mess. You're swinging rusty pipes and planks with nails in it. Basically basically shit weapons that break after a few hits. You have to pick your fights carefully, especially because stamina is limited, and getting surrounded in this game can overwhelm you with a shit ton of zombies. Timing headshots with melee weapons is super important, as a well-placed swing can decapitate a zombie, and it's one of the most satisfying things in the game. As you level up, combat essentially improves a lot. You gain access to heavy attacks, stealth takedowns, and hilarious parkour moves like the dropkick, which is probably Dying Light's most famous skill. It never gets old launching a zombie off a rooftop or into spikes with one kick, which by the way, the spikes are a bit stupid, I won't lie. The idea that even tiptoeing into a spike means instant death for a zombie makes no sense at all. Then there's the vault attack, where you can literally use a zombie as a springboard to smash another zombie in the face, though I would often use the vault to just escape or move around. It's more of a parkour move than a combat move. The progression clearly feels natural as the game keeps giving you new weapons over and over, but the best thing is that it never makes you overpowered early on. In fact, not once did I ever feel too powerful. Well, that's a lie. Eventually you start finding guns. Now guns are stupid because they change the tone of combat entirely. Firearms make encounters with every type of enemy in the game so much easier, but they do come with a drawback. Loud gunfire attracts virals, which are these super fast aggressive zombies who will swarm you in seconds. But in my opinion, even with that drawback, I think guns kind of ruined Dying Light, and I'm glad they were removed in Dying Light 2, because even volatiles, which are meant to be seen as these unkillable scary big monsters, can be taken down in like 3 or 4 headshots with a rifle. And the fact that ammo is pretty much unlimited despite you being in a zombie apocalypse is quite stupid. Just go to a shop and buy ammo. It's super cheap and every vendor in the entire game has them. Oh, and it also barely makes a dent in your ever-growing wallet. It's weird because there's a side quest at the start of the game where you need to find a pistol for a man named Dawood. And at that point, the game makes it seem like finding firearms in this game is super rare. But then in the second half of the game, every single human enemy you come across has a gun. And speaking of enemies, Dying Light's world has you dealing with a wide variety of them. The most common are the biters, which are your standard slow-moving zombies. During the day, they're manageable and pretty easy. Just avoid big crowds or use your stamina wisely. But at nighttime, they get a little faster and a lot more aggressive. Then you've got the virals, who are basically freshly turned humans. They're super fast and they don't give up easily. They'll sprint after you, dodge your swings, and even climb rooftops. And they also have a little bit of humanity left in them, but you can't be deceived. And that alone makes them feel like a genuine threat compared to the mindless biters. On the heavier side, you've got the goon, and yes, I did just say goon, which is a hulking brute who wields a massive rebar club. He's super slow, but if he hits the ground, he creates this kind of shockwave that can push you back and damage your health. Then there's the Demolisher, an even bigger nightmare capable of hurling cars and smashing through concrete. There's Toads that keep their distance, spitting toxic goo that blinds and burns you. I will say those are definitely the most annoying enemy in the game, as they just be camping on rooftops so far back spitting at you. Bombers shuffle towards you like they're suicide bombers. If they reach you, they just explode. Screamers are maybe the creepiest. Now these are children that were infected who just scream their heads off, summoning more trouble your way, and they also slowly drain your health. And of course there are volatiles, which I've already discussed earlier. But it's not just the infected, there's also the humans, and Rice's men are a big part of the enemy variety too. These are enemies armed with melee weapons and then eventually guns. I think there are a few more types of enemies, but those are the main ones that you need to know. The game also has a pretty good scavenging system, which ties into the crafting and upgrade systems too, and it gives meaning to every piece of loot that you find in the game. You're constantly searching every building, every car, dead body, bags, you name it, all so that you can craft whatever you like, especially the weapon mods. And those mods are where the fun begins. Turning a regular melee weapon into an electrified death blade or a flaming baseball bat never gets old. Blueprints are scattered across Harran too, which often is hidden in side quests or secret locations, rewarding you if you take the time to explore. The way the weapons degrade adds on to why the survival aspect of this game is so good. Each repair feels valuable, and you will always be juggling your arsenal, deciding which weapons to save for emergencies and which to burn through. Later in the game, as you unlock higher tier weapons and more repairs, it becomes less stressful. But in the early half of the game, every swing literally matters. Now what's brilliant is how the skill trees feed into this entire loop. You've got 3 main trees: agility, power, and survivor. Agility levels up as you parkour, power levels up through combat, giving you better attacks and takedowns, and survivor levels up through quests and surviving nights, offering perks like bigger inventory space, better crafting, and discount at vendors. It means you're constantly progressing no matter how you play. The idea is that if you fight more, you'll get stronger in combat. If you run more, you'll become more efficient in movement. Now all of what I mentioned, the movement, the combat, the crafting, the upgrades, everything works together to create a gameplay loop that's super rewarding. The gameplay of Dying Light doesn't force you to play a certain way, and that's what I like about this game. The idea is that if you want to fight, you can. If you want to avoid combat entirely and parkour everywhere, that's totally viable too. It's that flexibility that makes it so endlessly fun. This is the part I wanted to talk about in a separate topic, and that is side quests. I genuinely believe, now this might be a hot take, that Dying Light side quests are far superior than the main story. And by far superior, I mean it's not even close. Most of my enjoyment with Dying Light came from both the open world and the side quests. In fact, I'd argue that Dying Light is more of a side quest game than anything else. Harran is an open world filled with strange encounters and heartbreaking stories, and these smaller optional quests often feel more meaningful and well written than the main plot. A lot of them are not even fetch quests either. Many of them branch out and evolve over time, with some even carrying out over into the following DLC. I mean, take Tolga and Fatin for example, two interesting inventors who seem to be living in their own strange reality. You start by helping them with small, seemingly ridiculous errands, but their story keeps popping up as you progress throughout the entire game. By the time you reach the following, they've actually survived and continue their crazy experiments. It's a side story that follows you beyond the main game. I mean, they even make an appearance in Dying Light 2. That just shows you the fan appreciation these guys had. Then there's Ghazi from Mother's Day. Now, Ghazi is a mentally challenged man living in denial about his mother's death. To gain his trust and access to medicine he's hoarded, you have to play along with his delusion, bringing him chocolates and a movie for his mother, who turns out isn't even real. It's equal parts sad and unsettling, and it also gives us a reminder of just how out of hand the situation in Harran got, especially to the point where people refuse to believe that their loved ones have passed on. The gunslinger quest with Dawood is another one that sticks with you. He seems like a father trying to protect his son, and he asks for a gun. That rhymed. But after helping him, Dawood abandons his wife and flees with his child. And then what's even more tragic is that way later in the game, Dawood turns into an infected and forces his son to go hide, and you have to put Dawood down. That's a great side quest that starts from the very start of the game, and it literally carries over until near the end of the game. And who can forget Rupert the gunsmith? You'll find him caring for orphans in a daycare turned magic fortress, trying to shield them from the horror outside by pretending the outbreak is just a dark spell. It's kind of heartwarming at first, but then you realize that his wife is locked in the basement infected, and he refuses to put her down. Instead, you're asked to put her out of her misery, turning a simple rescue mission into a deeply emotional moment. You know, thinking of it now, a lot of Dying Light side quests are quite tragic, and it does reflect the theme of the game quite well. Now, those are just a few I named. There are so many, and I mean so many more that are memorable. There's a few expansions for open world games that are fantastic, and Dying Light's The Following is a great example of how to expand the story of the base game whilst also feeling totally refreshing in everything. So for example, if Dying Light's base story felt like being trapped in a collapsing city, The Following expansion is like stepping into an entirely different world, one that's somehow just as deadly, if not more. Now, this DLC takes us to somewhere different, but at the same time it's just around the corner. There are no more vertical playgrounds here at all. Instead, it's just now wide open farmlands, and you know, that's a nice refreshing change to have after going from Harran to Old Town. It feels more spacious, which, you know, is both cool and a bit eerie, because you can sometimes see zombies from way off in the distance. You know, many people prefer the base game, but some aspects of this DLC are superior. I think it's just farmland settings that I love. That's why a game like Far Cry 5 is such a fantastic game to me. The setting of Hope County is probably my favorite one in the Far Cry series, and again, it's an open-ended setting. Now, the actual narrative of The Following picks up right after the events of the main game. You play as Carl Crane again, heading out of the city into the countryside after hearing rumors about people who might be immune to the virus. Now, that alone, that setup, is fantastic. I like the mystery and the idea of uncovering new secrets in a completely different setting. But here's the biggest difference. Parkour is not the main focus anymore. Since you're not surrounded by tall buildings and rooftops, the developers gave you a new toy, which comes in the form of a buggy. Now, I will admit, at first I was a bit skeptical because, you know, running and climbing was one of my favorite parts of the base game. But the buggy grew on me really fast. It's a vehicle that's customizable, upgradable, and even has its own skill tree. You can add flamethrowers to it, you can electrify it, you can reinforce it, you can basically turn it into a rolling death machine. I had an absolute blast mowing down hordes of zombies, or just drifting through the countryside. That said, I did miss the thrill of scaling buildings to escape danger, and some of that vertical movement that made the city feel so alive. The combat and survival mechanics remain mostly the same, which is great. You're still scavenging for materials and of course crafting really creative weapons. Oh, and one cool new weapon in the following is the crossbow, which very quickly became my go-to. It's quite powerful and very quiet, but it feels so satisfying to use, especially when you start unlocking elemental arrows. Now combine that with the trust system in the countryside, where you earn the locals' respect and unlock more gear, and you've got some fresh progression to keep things interesting, again expanding on the base game. Now as for if I enjoyed the story, well, I did. I liked it. It goes in a darker, creepier direction. Instead of just surviving day to day, Crane stumbles upon a mysterious cult that worships the mother, a figure that's quite mysterious. It digs deeper into the virus's origins and the hopelessness of the infected world. And unlike the base game story, the following actually gives you multiple endings with a choice, including one of the most shocking endings, which is a nuclear detonation aimed at Harran. Now, I don't know how I feel about that ending because in the base game story, despite the overwhelming danger, there seemed to always be a glimmer of hope. Carl Crane sacrifices his own safety to help the survivors of the tower. But in the DLC, both endings undercut that message. If you choose to trust the mother, Crane becomes a volatile and ultimately spreads the virus beyond Harran. If you reject her, you're forced to nuke the city, killing everybody you worked so hard to save. Either way, all of Crane's struggles are rendered futile, and it feels like our entire journey is invalidated. It's funny because in the base game, Carl Crane is against carpet bombing the city, right? He says that multiple times, and just a few weeks later he's willing to nuke the city. Huh? Now, I would not prefer this expansion over the base game, but it's by no means a blowout. Dying Light's base game story is not the strongest, so I'm not exactly working with much here to compare it with. It's still a great story, but it's not a groundbreaking one like you'll see in The Witcher 3's DLCs. Those are what I would class as groundbreaking stories. If I had to point out some downsides of this DLC, it's of course the ending that I just mentioned, and also the reduced parkour. The base game made you feel like a free-running god, and in the following DLC you lose that feeling entirely, because the open areas don't demand as much climbing. In fact, the only climbing was really in the coastal town, which by the way is such a cool little town to explore. Also, maintaining and repairing the buggy can get a little tedious at times, especially when you just want to explore. But you know, to be honest, those are small complaints compared to how much fun I had. In terms of length, it's pretty solid for a DLC. If you focus on the main story, it's around 8 to 9 hours. But with side quest and exploration, you can easily stretch it to 15 to 20 hours. And the best part is that anything you earn or unlock in the following carries back into the base game. So even after finishing it, you can just go back to Harran with better weapons and upgrades. So yeah, overall it's a great experience, definitely worth it, and one of the better expansions I've played in any open world game. So that's Dying Light, a game that even 10 years later still feels special. Now sure, the main story has its flaws and some endings like in the following can feel a bit strange, but the journey, oh boy, the journey is what makes it unforgettable. The quality in the side quests, the movement system is peak, and the open world is just fantastic. I mean, it's an open world game, so evidently a lot of attributes outside the main story have to shine, and shine it did. So if you've never played Dying Light 1 or it's been a while, maybe it's time to return to Harran, especially since the beast is releasing quite soon. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one.